So, without further ado, let me introduce to you our presenter. He is a photo educator, ON1 guru, and landscape photographer based in San Diego, California. Scott, take it away.
All right, thanks, Nathan. Yeah, everyone, hi. Thanks for joining us today. My name's Scott. I'm based in San Diego, as Nathan said, and that's the last you're going to hear about me because we're here to talk about Photo RAW. So what I'm going to do over the next hour is work through, kind of how I approach doing basic images and, doing post-processing, a little bit of metadata. We'll start in Browse. We'll get into Develop and Effects. And toward the end, I'll show you a little bit of what goes on in layers as well. So as Nathan said, if you got questions, pop them into the chat area. I'll be pausing at a few times during this presentation so we can field questions. So I'm going to set a little context here. So we're looking at a few folders of images, and kind of the setup here is you've gone out on a shoot or you've been out for several days, whatever it is. You've gotten your photos, you've dragged them off of your memory card, your camera, you got them on your computer, and you want to start working with them. So I am in the Browse module. You can see that right over here. And for anyone who's not familiar with Browse, it's pretty much like any type of file browser, like Finder on a Mac or Explorer on Windows. You've got your folders on the left-hand side. You've got some filtering, which I'll show you in a little bit. Obviously, the folders themselves, we can drill down into them. And I have these several folders put into what's called an indexed folder, so it's easy for me to reach and find. So, what do I do when I first start thing? I'm going to go into this Oregon folder here. And I've got, I don't know, let's see, a little bit less than 50 photos here. Now, each one of these, to show you an idea of the speed here, these are 35, 36 megapixel raw images, and they show up immediately. This is fast. I haven't cataloged anything. I just browsed into the folder with all these images. So one of the first things I'll do is very basic metadata items. I'm going to select all of my folders, all my photos. So select all, or Command or Control A. And I want to make sure at the very least I've said I took the photo, right? And it's going to ask me, are you sure you want to apply this to everything? In this case, yes, I do. And I'll also open up IPTC, and I'm not going to make you watch me type, but I'll put in my email address, my website, my copyright tag. Do that for all the photos. Just get all the basics done so that this photo is associated with me. And once I'm finished with that, I need to go into doing some culling. I'll switch over to the film strip view. I like to do my culling this way. And let me deselect everything. Do that one more time. F key for film strip. The reason I like to use the film strip is I can see ahead on what's coming next. I shoot several sequences of photos. I shoot a lot at the ocean, and the ocean's always moving, and so different photos will have different wave patterns. And toward the end of the webinar, I'll show you how I use some of those to composite them and make a single image. So I like to be able to see what's coming down the line. And I also will put on the histogram mode, so I can see the histogram of the photo I have selected. This is helpful for when you're trying to figure out which of these photos is best exposed. If you're trying out several different exposures, you can look at the histogram quickly and get a quick vibe of, is this underexposed? Is it overexposed? Which one's my best exposure? So from here, my left hand is kind of hovering over the 1, 2, 3, 4 keys. You can see above the thumbnail, there are all these stars here. And I use a 5-star rating system. Generally speaking, 3-star and above is something I want to do things with. And below that, I'll tend to ignore it unless there's some sentimental value to the photo. So I'll hover my left hand over 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then my right hand is on my arrow keys. And I'll just start looking at the photos and going, do I like it or not? And this is very quick, right? So I'll put a 3 on this one, I like it. Wave patterns aren't as interesting on that one. This one's cool, 3. And then move all the way down the line. Now, I'm not going to walk through every one of these photos here because you'd get really bored really quickly. But to give you a feel for how I work with things. Now, and the thumbnail view, I can even see there are some others that I like. This one I like a lot, so I'll put a 4 on it. This one I like. It's very simplistic. I'll put a 3 on that one. And so on down the line. I like the lighthouse. And let's see, down toward the end, I know there's another couple down at the back here. I really like those, so I'll put 4s on those. I want to tag a few of these with star ratings so you can see how do I move into my next step of my workflow, which is switching back to the grid view. So I'll go to View, Thumbnail Grid. And these keyboard shortcuts are really good to know because I'm talking through this and describing menus, but when you start getting into things, I'm in the film strip mode with F key. I'm going to jump back to the grid mode, G. You'll move much more quickly learning these different keyboard shortcuts. So from here, I've gone through the photos. I've done an initial culling. I've tagged a few with a star rating that these are photos I want to work with. I'll go over to Filters, turn on the filters, and I want to see 3 stars and above. So of these 50 or so photos, I'm now down to 8 that I want to do something with these. These are my favorites. These are ones I want to work with. Now, whether you use star ratings or the heart for favorite, not favorite, or you want to use color labels, none of that matters, but I do encourage you to have some type of system that you can separate photos that you want to work on for photos that maybe you want to work on later. Like in this case, I might even narrow it down to just 4-star photos. These are the ones I really, really want to work on. So it gives you some latitude and some flexibility in being able to quickly zone in on the images that you want to work on. Let's see, a couple more things about Browse before we get into processing some photos. You've got full access to all the EXIF data. So if you had a question about, well, what was I shooting with, what lens was I shooting with, you can do much more filtering with time-based things. You can set up your own albums and smart albums with these tabs here. For a smart album uses your index folders, and you can use all sorts of metadata. You can use a lot of that EXIF information if you're looking for photos that you only shot with a certain camera or you only shot in a certain date range. All that stuff is here, and so it's really powerful. Let me take a quick minute to pause before we get into some processing. Nathan, are there any questions that people are just dying to ask before we move on from Browse into Develop?
Yeah, actually, Scott, we got a good one about where the metadata is written if there's an XMP sidecar file. You want to speak about that?
Sure, yep. So the metadata normally is just saved off in a backend database, but there is, in your preferences, let me find this here, right here under the Files tab, Save ON1 Sidecar Files for non-destructive edits and your metadata. So this will create a .on1 file next to wherever your raw photo or JPEG, whatever you're working with, is saved. So you can save these things out, and that way they can move with your photo, especially if you've seen some of the other videos on the ON1 site that are showing off how you can share photos between systems with network drives. You want to turn this on so that sidecar file moves with it and you receive it on another computer. You've got all the edits, all the metadata there.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't believe the preferences window appears for the presenter. It's not showing for everybody.
No.
But what Scott's showing right now is just the preferences menu, and there's a little checkbox in there that you can click to turn that feature on.
All right, yeah, so it's your preferences menu, the Files tab, and toward the bottom it will say ON1 Sidecar.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, well let's go ahead and process a photo. I really like the one of this lighthouse here, so I'm going to choose that one and go into the Develop module. And a couple of seconds, this will load in, and so here we have this our full raw image. My approach to developing and styling is I'll first want to do retouching, then I want to get my basic tone settled down, and then start to do fun with color or any type of stylization, vignettes, textures, and so forth, like the artistic side of it. I can already see I've got several dust spots all over the screen here. A good way to highlight dust spots is in your tone and color panel, take the haze slider and bring it all the way down. Now this looks terrible for the photo, but it really makes these dust spots show up. There's a couple over here that I didn't see. So I'll grab either the eraser or the retouch. For skies, the retouch is usually fine. There's not a lot of texture and detail, and so I'll just tap on or single click on these particular dust spots. I won't do them all because I don't want people to get bored. Watching me move dust spots away is about as fun as watching paint dry. You can go through this whole thing here, find all your spots, take care of them, and once we're done with that, take our haze slider and return it to 0. And I'm actually just going to double click on the name of the slider. That will return the slider to its default position. Now the next thing for retouching, there are a few distractions in this photo. The signpost here, there's one here, and there's one here, and I want to get those away. I want to make those removed. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Let's go to 50%, and actually let's go in all the way to 100. Let's do that. And so we can make sure we get a good looking removal. Now this is where the perfect eraser shines. And I'm going to start with the most difficult one, this sign in the background, because this is fence post. My bracket keys control the size of my brush. And the perfect eraser does a pretty good job of finding lines. And so I'm going to tease it a little bit by suggesting that it use that fence post to fill in some of this background. Let's see how we do here. That's pretty good. A little bit of cleanup there. And that's pretty common. You usually have to do 1 or 2 brush strokes to get a good looking fade. And if I didn't, this will be our little secret. If you guys didn't see me erasing that, you wouldn't really know that there was a sign there. We'll take care of the other ones. These will be easier work for the eraser. We'll pay attention to the horizon line to make sure we get a good look on the grasses up there. That actually looks pretty good. We want to clean up that little bit. And then this one here. Just sweep over that. There we go. And maybe this little stick or twig that's in the road there. All right. We'll zoom back out and fit this to screen. Okay, so retouching I'm pretty happy with when it's done there, and now we'll get into processing the raw file. So Photo RAW, it's got everything you would expect in a RAW processor. You've got your tone and color, which is where you do all your basics, exposure, contrast, white point, black point. And in the show more area, you have 10 other filters that you can add. So if you're not going to be doing any major stylization, you can do all your work right here in Develop. We will go into effects for this one, though, because there's just effects that I love to apply to most, if not all, of my photos. So I'm going to start with just the basic overall tone and color. I'm going to switch over to the histogram view so I can make sure as I adjust exposure, whites, and blacks, I'm not losing any important detail in the highlights or in the shadows. I'm going to start with exposure overall. I feel is pretty good for this. I do want to stretch out these white and black points, so I'm going to hold down the J key, and if you want to see how this is done with view, I can turn on show clipping. Let me actually just do that. I'll turn on show clipping. So right now I'm not pressing any keys. If I bring my whites up too high, we're going to start to see where I'm blowing out the sky and I'm losing any information there. So I can back that off, somewhere around there. Same thing with the blacks. I bring that down too far, we're going to start to see clipping in the lower corners in the bottom where the shadowy areas are. And I can bring that back up to a reasonable value, something like that. The numbers aren't important. It's the look of the photo that matters. And from here, what else will we do? I'm going to open the shadows up a little bit just for that foreground, and I am going to rein in the highlights some. I want the lighthouse to stand out, and so some of the highlights that are up in the sky, I don't want to lose detail, but I want to have this lighthouse stand out. We had a pretty flat image to begin with. Color, let's see. Actually, let's add a little more contrast before we move on to color. Some contrast there. That's going to certainly help us in bringing that lighthouse to life, adding some more depth into the scene. On to color, I'm going to tap or click Auto. And one of the reasons I'll do that is this is where we can set our white balance with our temperature slider. Auto is going to look at the photo, and Photo RAW is going to detect if there's any type of basic color cast and remove it. Now, for this scene, the camera did a good job in using the auto balance, or the white balance that was there. We're in good shape, so I'm not going to have to touch any of those things. I will increase saturation a little because I want the colors to rise up. This was kind of a flat, I don't know, dull type morning. But with those saturation and vibrances, now I'm getting more blues in the sky. I've got some nice greens in the foreground. And this is already a much more pleasing image. Now I'll move on to color. Add a color adjustment. And what I want to do here is get the greens and the blues to be a little richer. So we can see everything simpler. I'll close down tone and color, so we can just focus on our color adjustment. We've got these different presets across the top, and some of the most common ones are just a click away. Foliage, as you might guess, is going to increase the greens. So I can turn that off and turn that on. You can see those greens are getting much richer. Might actually even be a little bit too rich for my taste, so I'll take that saturation down a little bit. I also want the blues in the sky to be more vibrant. So now if I choose the sky preset, it's going to undo what I did with the greens. You know, a preset sets one thing. So if I tap on that, we'll see, all right, great, now the blues are looking better. But if I show you the green channels, and actually the yellow channels are also things that get adjusted for foliage, those have gone back to nominal. Foliage again, and then I can go into the blues and just adjust those individually. And maybe I'll crank that up to here, take down the brightness a little bit so we can deepen that sky. And what we're doing by doing this, if I bring it really far down, we're offsetting the blue sky from the lighthouse. So darker colors and cooler colors will retreat into the photo. So these blues are moving toward the back, and brighter colors like the whites of the lighthouse, those will move forward, and that's how our brain interprets images. And so we're creating more depth in the photo by darkening those blues some. All right, let's get into effects now. I want to add some dynamic contrast. Dynamic contrast, this is, well, if you're a landscape shooter, it's probably one of your favorite filters. It has a great natural look to begin with, which is the default that we get. You've got a whole lot of control over small details, medium details, large details, as well as tone controls. These are handy in and of themselves. In this case, I actually want to take the highlight slider, and I think I want to back it off a little bit. I don't want the sky to become too detailed, and I can even darken those highlights some too. Now, that's way too much. But it's nice that these controls are here. A question I'll get asked often is, well, I had highlights and shadows control in Develop in Tone and Color. Why are they here? Well, as you add more things to your photo, you may want to fine-tune them. Now, I could go back to Develop and go into Tone and Color and go deal with it here, but that's more clicks. It's more things I need to do. If I have it right here in my controls, it's just at my fingertips, and so I spend less time hunting for the tool that I want and more time getting my photo the way I want it. All right, what else to this image? Let's look at some local adjustments. So now, local adjustments, this is a new tab in Photo RAW. It's in both Develop and Effects, and this local adjustments tab applies to both modules. So if I switch back to Develop, these local adjustments remain. They're still very almost immediately available to you. What I want to do here is I want to darken this pathway. I want to make that pathway a little darker and lead us to this lighthouse. So I will grab the local adjustment gradient and just kind of drop it on the scene. And then I need to rotate it around. If I could click in the right spot. I've made my cursor large, and so that's becoming a little bit of a problem for me in figuring out the right spot to click for rotating. There we go. All right, we'll rotate this around. So the exposure slider in this local adjustment is darkening this bottom part of the frame. And this little icon here is the mask that we have on this adjustment. Black means we're not applying the effect. White means we are applying the effect. And we can adjust the feather of this, and so it fades out. Now, we're darkening everything here, and that's not what we want. We just want the path. Now, there's a couple of approaches to getting this local adjustment to be only on the path. One would be to use the brush and brush away the effect from the grasses. It's perfectly doable, and if you like masking and are comfortable with it, there's great masking tools in Photo RAW. But I want to show you the gear menu and these blending options. Now, this is a little more of an advanced thing, but I think it's like an unsung hero of Photo RAW, that you have all these controls here. So there's different blending options, and that's I think it's a little more important for when you're working with layers. But these apply to options are fantastic. I want to darken the road. Well, the road is a neutral color. So if I choose neutrals, this has already changed dramatically, just before and after. Now, I still got some neutrals going on there. I can adjust the range and say, well, what is neutral? I can make everything neutral. This is what we had before I went in here. Or I can dial this back to just fine-tune the road, and then finally, fine-tune the darkness so it's not completely black and doesn't look unnatural. But to me, this is a fantastic way to target adjustments to different tonal ranges. You've got different color ranges. You've got highlights, midtones, shadows, vivid colors, and you don't have to do the masking. And for me, this is a faster way to work. And it really explore this gear option when you're looking at trying to target an adjustment to something specific in your photo. I think the last thing I'll do is I'll go back into the filters and add a vignette. And in honor of this lighthouse, I think we'll make it kind of like a spotlight thing. So how I like to work with the vignettes, I will take the feather all the way to 0 and just add some initial darkness. And the reason I do this is now I can see exactly where the edge of my vignette is. And from here, I can adjust the size, I can adjust the shape. I said we'll make it kind of like a spotlight. And then with these crosshair tool, I can click and drag and position it exactly where I want it to be. Maybe even shrink it down a little bit. Then I'll bring the feather all the way back up and fine-tune the brightness, so we're just kind of leading our eyes to this lighthouse. So I'm going to hit the backslash key so we can see this is the photo that we started with. We did our brushing, so our dust spots and so forth were taken care of. We took out those signs. And this is after. It's a very different photo, and it went from something that was really kind of dull and flat into something with a lot more depth, very clear subject, and is overall a much more pleasing image. Nathan, I think that's a good point to pause for some more questions. What do we got going on?
Oh, we've got a lot of great questions coming in. One popular one is you showed some clipping technique earlier, and I don't think everyone caught how you showed the clipping feature.
Okay. Are the menus showing up for you guys on the broadcast? You see the menus?
I don't believe the menus appear. No.
Oh, that is strange. Okay. Well, there's a couple of ways to do it. Let me go back over to develop so we can see that. If you're a keyboard shortcut kind of person, you have Option or Alt-J. In the menus, there is View Show Clipping. Or I can press and hold the J key. Now I'm pressing and holding the J key. And then as I adjust, let's say, exposure, I can see where you see this red is blowing it out. And then as I slide left, we'll start to see some blue clipping in the deep shadows. So holding the J key down while you adjust sliders will show you like a heat map of the clipping. So that might be the most straightforward way to do it. Hold down J while you're adjusting things like exposure or highlights or shadows, and you'll see where your clipping shows up.
Great, thank you.
Anything else in there, or should we do another photo?
You know what? I think that's good. I'm being able to answer most people's questions. I'll jump in if I see a good one though, Scott.
Okay, yeah. Feel free to interrupt me. All right. Well, that one's done. Let's go back to browse, and I'm going to choose this one here. I like this one, and our preview opened up there, so now we can see our final image. And let's do this one here of a spot called Secret Beach. All right. So a similar approach. We saw what I did before with spot removal and so forth. We're going to go through those same steps, The reason that I chose this image is because there's some really steep dynamic range here. We've got incredible highlights up in the sky, and the foreground is in very deep shadow. As you'd expect, the sun's already hidden behind some clouds here. I'm looking at the dark sides of all of these rocks and so forth. But there are plenty of controls and plenty of data in this to pull out a lot of those shadow details. You see, we're not doing too much clipping there at all, and we're going to use some photo raw power to get things open here. I will take care of a handful of dust spots really quick that I see that will otherwise kind of irritate my eyes as we move through this. I'm sure we'll find a few more as we process the photo, and that's okay because the retouch and eraser brushes are always available for us. Okay, those are the few of the ones I can see. There's one more. It's going to annoy me. Let's get rid of that one. All right, I'll tell you, having a mirrorless camera is great, except when you change lenses, the sensor is just right there, and you get dust on it all the time. And, actually, I'm going to clean up that one there for the very observant. That didn't do a nice blending job, so we'll use the eraser to sweep around that one and kind of clean it up. That's a little better. All right. Okay, so we've got our histogram open. We've done the basics on our spot removal. Let's do exposure adjustments and so forth. I'm gonna hold down the J key this time so we can see our clipping. So if I'm pressing J, you can see I've already got clipping in the scene. And that area doesn't bother me as much, short of wanting to print this and making sure that there was something in those areas. If you're doing your work for the screen, I don't mind clipping terribly when it makes sense. If you're looking into the sun or shooting into the sun, there's going to be areas with blown out highlights. It's the sun, and it's natural. Our brains aren't going to reject the image because of that. When you look at the real world, that's how it's going to appear. And I will adjust that exposure some. Let's take it down a little bit, so we're minimizing some of that highlight blowout. Speaking of highlights and shadows, let's see, black point and white point look good on the histogram, so I don't think we need to do any adjustment there. We're already out at the edges, so this is our deepest blacks, these are our brightest whites. We do need to bring up shadows, and we need to bring them up quite a bit. So we'll start raising shadows, and I'll press the J key again. We shouldn't have any problems with blowout or increasing blowout there because we're focusing on the shadows. Now, something I need to be careful of, I could be tempted to take the shadows all the way up. If you notice along the edge of this rock, we could be introducing some haloing there by adding, I increased the shadows too much. I don't want to get too much halo on that. And I also don't want to lose the ambience of the scene there. It was silhouetted, so maybe around 50 feels pretty good to me. Temperature-wise, this is pretty okay. I do want to experiment a little bit. So let's do, it's a cloudy day, so I'm going to choose the cloudy preset. And it's a different feel. It's warmer. For landscapes, I kind of treat white balance as an artistic choice. It doesn't have to be perfectly true to like if you're shooting with a gray card or something like that. But that's up to you. I'm going to let this be a little bit warmer than cloudy. I will revisit contrast. You notice I'm not going in order of the sliders, and that's to me one of the nice, more powerful things about RAWs. You can go in any order you want, really to arrive at your final photo however is best for you. There's many different ways to do all of these techniques, and each of us has either a different approach that we like or something that makes more sense to us. And go for it. There's no right or wrong way to arrive at your final image. A little saturation and a little bit of vibrance. Now this photo has quite a bit of oranges in it, and I want to amplify those. Let's go and grab another color adjustment. So we've kind of done our tone, and let's move into color now. I'm going to click on desert, and that's nice. It's adding a little more into the sky, a little strong, because one thing about saturating reds and oranges is those colors can really get over amplified quickly. Like if I take this orange slider, the sky is just becoming terrible. We're getting some solarization going on in those hot spots in the clouds. We certainly don't want to do that. And I might even take that back away from red a little bit toward orange. So just this color adjustment there. We're giving the sky a little more depth, a little more dimension. And some of that glow that we have out at the horizon is improving. Speaking of the sky, I do want to bring that down a little bit more. So we'll go to the local adjustments tab, and I'll grab a local gradient, drop it around the horizon. We'll feather that out a little bit and fine-tune the exposure. So this is just going to darken the sky some. Let's see. This is more or less nothing. Around there is looking pretty good. Just to take a little more of the hotness away from the top of this and feather it out so it's fading to the horizon. And so this horizon area is going to become a little bit brighter, and that's ultimately the draw in to the scene. I want the eyes to go into the scene, staying inside. All right. What else to accomplish for this photo? I like this this tree that's growing out of this rock. That's one of the reasons I chose this particular framing. That was just really cool to me. So I want to enhance that. Now we saw develop in the color adjustments, we can do things with green and so forth and boost up greens. But what I can't do is target the adjustment with a mask. I'll move into effects and I'll use a color enhancer. Now I've got the same tools available, but what I also have is the ability to do masking. And so again, this is another example of, well, I have color tools in develop, I have color tools in effects. Why are they in both places? Well, here I can target these colors very specifically to one area of the photo. So we're going to do a little bit of masking. First, we'll hit the foliage preset, and we're going to see that this green of this tree is starting to pop up more. Now this is affecting greens everywhere. I haven't done any masking yet. So the green in the water that's in front of this rock to kind of off to the left and behind the tree is also increasing, and I don't really want that. So with the brush selected, I'm going to bring my opacity of the brush up to pretty high. I'm going to turn on the perfect brush. Now, over in my mask on the right-hand side, I'm going to tap or click invert. So what I've done, again, now I have a large black mask. I'm not having any color applied at all. I'll switch the brush to paint in. I want to paint in this color effect. And with the perfect brush turned on, as I click, and I'm just doing some single clicks on the greens of this tree, the perfect brush is doing edge detection, and so it's targeting it only to the tree. I'm going to press the O key. O is the mask overlay, and it did a pretty good job. We can remove some of that effect from over here and here, and I can switch the mask view mode. Let's see, do I have that available down here? We're just showing and hiding it there. I can't change it. Unfortunately, I can't see. In the mask menu, there is a view mode, and I can choose either grayscale or red overlay. I've just switched it to red. And so when I press the O key again to view, now we can see the red is where I have no color applied, and where we punch through and see the tree is where I'm applying color. Something else I did there I realized I didn't verbalize is I used the X key. Right now, the brush has a minus in the center of it, and that means to paint out, paint away the effect. If I press the X key, you'll see it change to a plus. The X key toggles the brush mode. That's another one of these keyboard shortcuts that's really handy to use when you're doing masking. And now I can paint back in, and I'm really just kind of getting a bits of those greens to show up on the mosses on this rock in the foreground. And I can even turn off the perfect brush at this point because I'm just staying all inside this rock. I'm not worrying about hitting the ocean or hitting anything else. This is a pretty easy area to mask. So let's take a look at that before and after. Before and after. And that's just punching up the greens on that tree a bit more. Next thing is I do want to get a little more detail into these rocks, so we will add dynamic contrast. Now this applies it everywhere, and this, for me and my style, this is more than I want. I don't want the sky to be getting as much of that contrast there. These are softer, wispier clouds, so I don't want those showing up. So again, I could start masking, or I can explore the gear menu and take a look at our apply to area. Now the rocks are mostly in shadow, so I'm going to choose shadows. Now I'm automatically protecting the sky and some of the ocean areas. I'll toggle this off and on to see what's really happening here. And I'm seeing some contrast being applied to this ocean area that I don't want, but the rocks themselves are getting pretty good. Oops, I just zoomed in. Sorry about that. There we go. So I'm going to dial down the range and pull that back. So the range slider here, I'm working with shadows, and I'm telling the dynamic contrast filter, what do I want you to consider a shadow? And I can say, nothing, just the deepest shadows, everything. And really, I'm watching the photo now as I adjust the slider to just get it so that I'm not adding too much contrast to the ocean itself, and it's really staying within the shadowy rock areas. And that's pretty good. I'm going to settle with that. So again, before and after. And it's one of those things where, again, I could do masking. I could get a masking brush or, and move through the ocean and take the effect away. But these apply to and range sliders are great time savers for not having to do that detailed masking. One other, I think this, I'll put this in the more advanced bucket, is I'm going to add a photo filter. And the idea here is I want to give a little more color to the sky, and really only the highlights. Now, the default photo filter is a dark blue. I'm going to choose an orange, and I'm going to guess that my color palette isn't showing up, but I'm picking an orange, and you can see that showing up here in the color swatch. And I'm going to turn to these blending modes again because I want to target this to just the sky areas. Now, what's in the sky? Well, the sky has our highlights and some midtones. So 3 sliders I haven't talked about yet in this. Whoops, I hit the gear menu for the wrong filter. Photo filter. Here we go. So the 3 sliders I haven't talked about yet are these protect sliders. So I'm applying the filter everywhere. And you can target an individual range, or you can say I'm applying it everywhere, but I want to downplay or protect certain areas. So I'm going to protect the shadows. I don't want the rocks getting as warm. And I want to protect the midtones quite a bit, actually. I don't want too much happening there. Again, the numbers aren't important. I'm just watching the photo as I move the slider back and forth. And so before the photo filter, after, it's touching mostly the sky. I'm maintaining that orange happening in these reflections. These are highlights. I think I'll take the opacity down of that maybe about halfway, just so it's a nice little subtle nudge in a direction of a sunset. And vignette-wise, I don't think I'm even going to add one because I've already got dark corners in most places, and I'm pretty happy with the scene overall. So let's look at before. What came out of the camera, really wide dynamic range, bright highlights, very, very deep silhouetted shadows, and after. So we did our tone adjustments. We did a little bit of targeted work with the greens on this tree, and then we did some dynamic contrast to just the rocks, and a photo filter with a little bit of a color overlay to the sky. And I think I like this one a lot, so I'm going to save it as a preset. I'll go into settings, save settings as preset, and again, I'm going to guess that this is not showing up for you all, but I'll go ahead and save it anyway, and I'll show you over in Browse that if I reduce this to my 1 stars, actually let's turn off the filters here so we can see other photos. Like if I have another sunset scene that has silhouetted things like this one, I can go over to my presets tab, and I had one I just called it preset. I can apply it right here in Browse, and I can get that look right away. And if I hit the E key for the photo view, I'm already well on my way to processing this image using the work that I did on the previous one. Nathan, let me pause again for some questions there.
Sure, yeah. A lot of people are asking if you could save your settings as a preset, and you just showed that. But Sharon would like to know, she doesn't see any layers panel. Are all the changes you're making applied to the original image, and is this a non-destructive process?
Okay, so yeah, we're not using layers yet. I'm actually going to show you some layers, Sharon, here in just a minute, but let's bring this photo back up into Develop. These are all non-destructive, so the raw file out on disk has not been touched. If I were to open that in some other program, you'll find that, deep, shadowy, let me hit the backslash key, you'll find a photo that looks like this. That's what's on disk. All of these tone, color adjustments, all the things we did in effects, including these different blending options, those are all saved as kind of instructions. They're instructions that we give Photo RAW. Say, when you open this image, go get those instructions and apply them, please. So completely non-destructive, and we're not doing layers, but I tend to think of filters and so forth. They're kind of like layers, but they're like adjustment layers. I'm doing a color enhancement adjustment here, and I'm doing a contrast here, and so forth. And these can be rearranged if you wanted to, although the end result is going to be the same. But these are stacking things up like you would stack physical filters on the front of your camera.
Yeah, perfect. And what if you wanted to just start all over with the same file from scratch?
If you wanted to completely remove what you've done, you could do reset all, and that will reset all of your develop settings, all of your effect settings. If you wanted to kind of try, I would save them as a preset if you think you might want to go back, and then you can try something else entirely. So I can reset all, and we're back to square one. There's nothing applied in develop. All of my sliders are nominal. I've got no effects applied.
Yeah.
Yep. Maybe one other thought on that. If you're thinking in terms of, I have this photo. Let me go back to browse, and just so we can focus on what we need to work on. If I have this photo and I've done one treatment on it, I want to try a different treatment on it and see them side by side. Today, you'd need to make a copy of your raw file, but in a update of Photo RAW coming in the first quarter or so of 2017, it will have support for creating a version or like a virtual copy. So you'd be able to do that. And I'm personally really looking forward to that feature. All right, let's see. How are we doing on time? Actually, pretty good. Good. So let's do one other example. This goes into layering. So we're actually going to use the layers module. Let me move back up and into this photo where I have 3 images, and I'll make my thumbnails a little bigger. So you saw in the other folder, I take sequences of photos a lot, and in this particular scene, I spent about 20 minutes or so trying to wait for Mother Nature to give me an interesting sweep of water in the foreground and have water spilling over the rocks on both sides, and it just never really happened. So something I'll do often, because this is pretty much a common experience where nature doesn't quite do what you want it to. It has no respect for my camera. Is take several photos, plant a tripod, get your settings dialed in, and just watch the scene. And I took a photo where I was happy with the foreground. I got another one where I got a nice spill over the rock on the left, and then finally the rock on the right. I can bring all of these into layers and blend them together. So let me select all 3. So I'm doing a Command or Control to select all 3, and I'll hit Layers. I want to add these as a layer, and this will take all 3 of these photos, bring them into layers as a single photo document, and stack them all up for me. All right, so here we go. So on the top, we have kind of our base image. So the top layer is what we see now. This is our nice sweep in the bottom there. I'm going to choose and to rename that as base. I'm just double-clicking on the name of the layer. Let me make that invisible for a minute. Our next layer down has the water I want on the left rock. So let's just call that left rock. And we'll make that invisible for a minute. And what we have left is the right rock. Okay, so we've got 3 layers that I want to combine all these together. And I tend to work with layers in hiding the top and revealing what's beneath. You can do it the other way if you like, but for me, I have full view of this and I want to punch down and reveal what's beneath. So I'll grab the masking brush and I'll set the opacity is going to be pretty high, but I want a healthy feather. Okay, so maybe something like 40. I'll use my bracket keys. And so what I'm going to do is just start clicking and dragging through here. And that was really sloppy. Let's tighten up that brush a little bit. And what I'm revealing, those waves that are coming over the rock that's beneath it. And since I'm shooting on a tripod, I didn't have to worry about aligning layers. The rocks aren't going to move. And as I get close to the edge where I'm really going to fuse together the 2 images, I'll reduce the opacity some and kind of sweep through here. I'm going to do this kind of quickly for the purposes of keeping the webinar moving. There's also in the refine mask section, a blur mask tool, and that will help smooth out the edges of this mask some. Let's go back to our brush and maybe get a little bit more in there. You start to get the idea how I can fill this in and get that to show up. Now once I'm done with punching down, so you can see my mask has got this black swatch here, and if I press the O key, we can see this is what I've painted away from. I've removed and put a hole in my base image and revealing what's beneath it, this left rock. I'm going to take that and I'm going to use the merge layer key. I'm done with these 2 layers, and it will take base and squash it down. So now I have, this is the only image I have. I take away base. That's actually got 2 of the 3 pieces I need. And I'll repeat the process for bringing in the right rock. So bring my opacity of my brush back up. Let's pull that down. Oh, come on, Scott. There we go. All right. One more quick look so I can see about where I need to brush. Kind of in through here and down into this area there. Getting close to the edge. We'll take the opacity down some. Feather that in a little bit. And then do a little blurring work. The blur tool is only working on the edges of the mask. So I'm going to press the O key for a moment so you can see the mask. And as I brush around the edge of that mask, you can see that feather of it getting wider, or this seam where we painted at 100 and this is at 50. Brushing that together. This is a little more advanced work for doing compositing, but all the tools are here. All right, and we're all done with that. And so then, I'll merge that down, and I've got a finished image that to me feels a lot more complete. I've got all the elements of the scene that I wanted in there, and it's available and built into Photo RAW. I didn't have to go to any other tools, any other layering products. I had everything right here. All right, that, Nathan, brings me about to the end of stuff I had prepared. We got about 10 minutes left, so if there are some other questions, we can field those now.
Yeah, awesome, thanks, Scott. So earlier when you were demonstrating the various layers, and I know you merged them just now, but if you would have saved the PSD with those layers and those layers still intact, would they be available again if you opened that same PSD in, say, Photoshop, or even again in layers?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I can go ahead and do an undo, and let's go ahead and just save that. So I've got 2 layers there. The masks and the layers would be available if I open them up again, and if you bring them over into Photoshop, it's a Photoshop compliant document, so you'd see that as well. Close that out. We'll go back over to Browse. There's our layered document, so that's our PSD file. If we bring that back into Layers, We'll wait for that to load up. We'll have our 2 layers there again, and our masks are still there.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll put you on the spot here. We're getting a lot of
Okay.
requests for people to see the Orton effect, if there's an Orton effect, if you're familiar with that, Scott. I know it's in there.
Okay. I'm actually not a big Orton effect kind of guy, so
There seems to be a lot of
if
fans
we
of the Orton
have
effect.
we have a, I know there's a preset for it. Let me go ahead and close out on this. And
A lot of folks thought it would look good on your lighthouse photo you had.
all right, well let's go over to Lighthouse. I'm willing to go off semi-script. Not like I really had a script for this, guys. Let's find our lighthouse. Here's our lighthouse. And I recall there being some type of Orton feature in here. I'm going to use the search box because Orton. We don't have one called Orton? Oh, no.
There
Well,
is an
Nathan, if you
Orton.
know,
Let me see here. Jump into
can this
effects.
go into effects itself? Okay, let's do
Yeah.
that. All right. Into effects. Oh, I wait for that retouch to rebuild so my signs go away.
Yeah, I know it's in here
This will
somewhere.
be good. If this turns out to work out well, I may have a new little trick to play
Right.
with.
So the Orton effect's
Now,
kind of like a glow with a color
yeah.
boost, really.
So in Glow, we've got Orton Clean. Orton Here's a Who. Maybe Clean looks pretty all right. So okay, so it's a preset in the Glow area, and I might take that down some, and perhaps protect my shadows some because the base seems to be getting a little bit busy for my tastes, but something like that. So before and after.
Thanks, Scott. Sorry to put you
So
on the
that's
spot
where,
with that.
yep. Well, that's okay. Actually, it highlights one other thing with these various presets. I just changed Orton Clean. I can actually save this as a new style. Maybe I'll call it Orton Scott or something, where it's a little bit backed off opacity-wise. You can change and set and save your own individual styles within each filter, which is pretty darn cool. So you can really customize this to just your needs.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I'm just scanning through. You can ask your questions over on the right in the questions area. A lot of people are wondering if this is being recorded, and yes, it is, and it will be posted to the ON1 website shortly after this presentation ends. Scott, we do have a ton of questions about kind of how Photo RAW would integrate with Lightroom and the various workflows about Lightroom. If you want to just speak to that, I know you do use Lightroom.
Yeah, I do use Lightroom as my asset manager. Photo RAW integrates with it entirely. Now, it works as a plugin. So when you're in Lightroom and you're going to send anything to a plugin, you're going to use a TIFF or a PSD or some other file format other than RAW. So I would recommend, if you're going to use Lightroom as your front end, do some very basic adjustments in Lightroom, like your basic panel, to make sure, like the image that we had of the silhouetted beach, you want to bring out those shadow details, at least get your exposure done before you bring it over into Photo RAW. Now, once you're in RAW, you have access to develop, you have access to effects, you can do all those things. But you will be working on a PSD file, and you can set that PSD file as a smart photo, so meaning it's like the ON1 smart photo technology, and you can re-edit those settings at a later time. But you will be working on a baked image, to be the opposite of a raw image, when you're using it as a plugin to Lightroom.
Yeah, and how could you print if you wanted to print with Photo RAW?
Well, printing, it's not something I was intimately familiar with, but you have the resize module where if you needed to resize the photo, now it's going to have to go render this whole thing, because at this point now, when I'm going to print, I am going to commit effectively all of these changes, and so Photo RAW needs to go and create an image that is not the raw plus those instructions as I was describing earlier. It's got to take those together and put them into a format that we'd print. So you can go into resize and prepare for printing, and you've got all of the various types of tools that you would expect to find. You'll be able to change the size of it. You can actually add borders and bleeding, and there's actually a wealth of stuff in here to do just about anything you'd need to do your printing. You've got your document sizes, you can do your pixel dimensions, you've got presets if you've got doing certain things on canvases or if you're sending stuff out to photo labs. But all of those types of things are in resize. And even if you don't need to resize the photo per se, I mean, this is a pretty large file to begin with. But this is where you can do all of your print sharpening. If you wanted to add grain, if you like to do that, if you're going to do a print that's going to be tiled across, like a triptych or something like that, across three, this one I'm thinking of something that would be columnar to kind of highlight the lighthouse. All of that type of stuff is done in resize, and then once you're ready, this will export it into either one or multiple images that you would use to your print lab or your printer at home.
Yeah, and you can just print through the file menu anywhere inside of the app.
Yeah, I'd show you, but apparently my menus aren't showing up.
That's okay. Well, if anybody's got any last minute questions here, I think that pretty much wraps it up. Scott, I want to thank you for giving this presentation today. I really appreciate it. Everyone for showing up again. This is being recorded, and we will post it to the website here, probably within the next couple hours. So thank you again. And Scott, I'll let you sign off.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed this, got something out of it, and are starting to already have fun with Photo RAW. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to join me. Goodbye.